Republican leader. Oops, sorry, I didn't hear him.
The whole country continues our vigil for the people of Florida who are hunkered down through Hurricane Ian. The storm's landfall yesterday brought surging seas and sustained winds over 150 miles an hour. 2.5 million Florida families and businesses are reportedly without power. Evacuation orders have been in place for more than 2 million residents of the Gulf Coast. The extent of the damage has barely even begun to come into focus. Fortunately, the coordinated state and local response led by Governor DeSantis and supported by federal agencies is ongoing. Yesterday, our two colleagues from Florida led the state's entire congressional delegation in asking President Biden to issue a major disaster declaration and unlock further aid. I understand the President agreed this morning. The Senate will stand ready to provide further assistance if needed. The government funding legislation before us will make sure the disaster relief fund is refilled. And most immediately, Floridians remain at the forefront of the nation's prayers. Now, on a completely different matter, families across America have felt the brunt of this all-Democratic government's failed energy policies. When gas prices were skyrocketing, the Biden administration insisted up and down they had no control over them. When the prices started to level off, the same politicians asked for a round of applause. Funny how that works. Here's what working families in Kentucky know, that a gallon of gas costs over a full dollar more than before President Biden took office. American families and small businesses know their electricity bills skyrocketed this spring and this summer. And they know the heating costs on Democrats' watch this fall and winter may well be catastrophic. Just like our overall 13.2% inflation since January 2021 is directly traceable to Democrats' reckless spending, a lot of our energy crisis is traceable to Democrats' short-sighted policies. Democrats have spent 20 years saying we shouldn't explore for American energy, that our abundant fossil fuel resources should actually stay in the ground. Just in the last 2 years, Democrats overwhelmingly voted 2 separate items to let the Biden EPA ban fracking. One analysis showed the kind of fracking ban Democrats want will quadruple household energy bills. Democrats supported President Biden's de facto ban on both offshore and onshore oil and gas leasing. They backed President Biden's decision to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline. I guess it's better to import Middle Eastern crude than safely transport oil from Canada. They voted for reckless tax hikes, including a natural gas tax that will directly drive up families' heating costs. And this week marks the 6-month anniversary of when President Biden began his reckless draining of our strategic petroleum reserve in a desperate attempt to buy up his poll numbers. President Biden has already released more than 200 million barrels from the reserve into the international market, more than all other presidents in our history combined. A few days ago, he promised to release an additional 10 million barrels in early November. Our country established the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as a lifeline for national security crises. Until now, presidents had only ever tapped it for armed conflicts or natural disasters. Now Democrats are emptying out our emergency reserves in a desperate attempt to save their political skins. Reckless and cynical does not even begin to cover it. Now the reserve sits at its lowest point since 1984. If our country were cut off from oil imports tomorrow, we'd have less than 2 months' supply. And remember, Madam President, 2 years ago in the early COVID crisis, when markets were temporarily crashing and oil was selling for bargain basement prices like we'd never seen, Republicans tried to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to the top when the prices were low. It would have been a win for economic stability, a win for national security, a huge win for taxpayers. Oil actually was on a clearance sale, and we could have filled the reserve right up to the top. But Senate Democrats blocked it and bragged about blocking it. Leader Schumer boasted in writing that he'd blocked a bailout for big oil. A bailout for big oil. Typical tired old liberal rhetoric. What our Democratic colleagues blocked was an unbelievably good deal for the American people. Now they're draining the reserve. They wouldn't let us refill. And when they do need to refill it, you'd better believe taxpayers won't be paying March 2020 prices, I can tell you that. Short-sighted, ineffective, bad economics, that's Democrats' energy policies in microcosm. Working Americans pay the price every single day. Now, in another matter, runaway inflation isn't the only crisis keeping American families up at night. The last 2 years have seen law and order deteriorate all across our country. Public safety has eroded. Violent crimes like murders and carjackings are breaking records, and our southern border has turned into a turnstile. We've seen the violence and chaos firsthand in Kentucky, especially in my hometown of Louisville. But we aren't alone. This is a nationwide phenomenon on Democrats' watch. Philadelphia just saw their 1,000th carjacking this year. It's not even October yet. Carjackings in Philly have quadrupled since just 2019. In Phoenix, Arizona, the first half of this year saw homicides jump up more than 25% compared to 2021. One woman whose brother and cousin were both shot and killed a few weeks ago said, quote, "It's like the community has actually become accustomed to it." In 2021, Denver recorded more murders than they had seen in a single year since 1981. And the pace was 23% higher still in the first half of 2022. Nationwide, robberies and thefts in big cities shot up 20% in the first half of the year. So it turns out that when an entire political party builds its brand around undermining the police, going easy on repeat offenders, and putting criminals' interests ahead of innocent families, bad things happen. Bad things also happen when the same political party decides to stand down on border security. Over 2 million illegal immigrants apprehended by CBP this fiscal year alone, not even counting all the people who evaded capture. An avalanche of illegal drugs coming into our land. Now, these are massive concerns among the American people, concerns that our Senate Democrat majority has intentionally spent all year doing nothing whatsoever to address. Now, one final matter. When the Senate votes today to fund the government, we'll also approve further emergency aid for Ukraine. The Ukrainians have made remarkable progress in pushing back Russia's unhinged aggression. But the fight is far from over. They need more of the cutting-edge weapons that are helping them turn the tide. Assisting Ukraine is not some feel-good symbolic gesture. It's literally an investment in our own national security and that of our allies. Blunting Putin's offensive in Ukraine will diminish his capacity to threaten other targets throughout the free world. It will also help deter other authoritarian regimes like China. Nobody's saying America should stand alone. Some of our European allies, especially on NATO's eastern flank, have been incredibly generous, digging deep into their inventories and welcoming hundreds of thousands of refugees. But others can and must do more. The Senate's consistent support for Ukraine at reasonable levels plays a critical part in nudging our allies to step up. Ukraine needs more tanks, more fighting vehicles, longer-range rockets, artillery, and air defense systems, more HIMARS, more drones, and preparatory training in Western fighter aircraft. And they need these things as soon as possible. Yesterday, the Biden administration announced another tranche of assistance, but the HIMARS rocket systems included in that announcement won't arrive in Ukraine for years. If the administration cannot move faster, it will be an indictment of their persistent unwillingness to invest in our own military stockpiles and our own defense industrial base. Now that Congress is providing more funding, the Biden administration must move more swiftly to deliver it to Ukrainian forces on the front lines soon. Now is not the time for hesitating, hand-wringing, or self-deterring from the administration. It is not true strength and resolve that provoke the bully. It is delay and weakness. Oh, I withhold. Sorry.
Madam President.
The senator from Indiana.
Madam President, I want to take a moment this morning